Aaron stood in the middle of my 420-square-foot studio apartment, holding his phone up like he was hosting some kind of comedy show on stage. The screen glowed with the bright red light of a live recording, and I could see the notification icons popping up as people started joining. My stomach dropped immediately. "Guys, look at this," he said, laughing into the camera with pure amusement in his voice. "My sister lives in a shoebox. This is where dreams come to die." He panned across my small kitchen, showing the worn counters I'd cleaned that morning. My tiny bedroom was visible through the open door, and I could see him zooming in on it. My modest furniture that I'd carefully picked out over 3 years, the thrift couch, the desk I'd refinished myself, the bookshelf I'd filled with things I loved. Each object on screen felt like a personal attack. My hands clenched around a chipped mug I'd been holding, so tight I thought it might break. Heat rose behind my eyes, burning, and my throat tightened until I could barely breathe. I wanted to say something sharp, something cutting that would make him feel small the way he was making me feel, but nothing came out. He just kept laughing, kept filming, kept turning my home, the place where I felt safe, into entertainment for thousands of strangers on the internet. The chat was probably exploding with mean comments about my apartment. Then his phone buzzed. The sound cut through his laughter like a knife through paper. He glanced down at the screen, still grinning, still holding the recording phone in one hand. His actual phone was ringing in his other hand. He swiped to answer it without ending the live stream. "Yeah, what's up?" Aaron said into the phone, his voice casual and lazy like he didn't have a care in the world. He was still holding the recording phone in his other hand, still standing in my apartment like he owned it. His smile stayed frozen on his face. Then I heard a voice on the other end, a man's voice, professional and clear and serious. "Is Megan Walsh available?" the voice asked. "I need to discuss the rent evaluation for your unit." Aaron's smile collapsed like a building imploding in slow motion. His eyes went wide, wider than I'd ever seen them. He looked at me standing there watching him, and I could see the exact moment he realized what was happening. The exact second when all the pieces started connecting in his brain. I felt something shift inside me, not anger, but something colder and sharper. Something like inevitability. The feeling of watching dominoes fall in a line you'd set up long ago. His landlord repeated, "Megan, are you available?" I stood completely still, watching my brother's face change from confident to confused to panicked in the span of about 3 seconds. Freeze frame on that moment. That was me. I was the person his landlord wanted to talk to. And in that exact moment, everything changed. The power in the room shifted like the ground beneath us was moving. Aaron's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He didn't know what to say. Neither did I, not yet. But I knew this was the beginning of something he wouldn't see coming. "My name is Megan Walsh, and I'm 29 years old. I work as a property manager for a mid-size rental company here in Portland, Oregon. It's not the most exciting job in the world, and it definitely doesn't get me invited to parties or make me sound impressive at family gatherings. But it's mine. I earned it. I worked for it. I've never had much, not growing up, not now, not ever really. But every single inch of what I have, I built with my own 2 hands. I fought for it. My family calls me the quiet one. They say it like it's a personality flaw. Like being quiet means being invisible. Like being invisible means being less than everyone else. Like it means I don't matter. Aaron, my older brother by 4 years, calls me something different. He calls me the barely getting by sister. He says it when he thinks I'm not listening, but I always am. I always hear it. The mocking tone is impossible to miss, carved into every syllable. He's always been like this, always had something to say about my choices, my job, my apartment, my life, my clothes, my car, everything. But I never said anything back. I just let it roll off me like water off a duck's back. Or at least, I tried to. The truth is, his words stuck to me like wet leaves. They sat heavy in my chest. They made me doubt myself on hard days when I was already feeling low. I thought that was just what brothers did. I thought that was normal family dynamics. I didn't know yet that normal could change. Growing up, my mom always said the same thing whenever Aaron teased me until I wanted to cry. "He's just teasing," she'd say with a laugh. "That's what big brothers do. That's how they show love." But he wasn't just teasing. There was something mean underneath it. Something calculated and purposeful. He'd mock my thrift store clothes even though his clothes came from the same thrift stores when we were kids. He'd make jokes about my grades even though my grades were actually better than his. He'd laugh at my jobs even though he'd had 5 different jobs by the time he was my age. He couldn't hold anything down for more than a few months. The teasing never felt playful or warm. It felt like he was trying to push me down so he could stand higher. Like he needed me to be small so he could feel bigger. Adulthood didn't change him one bit. It only gave him a bigger audience for his meanness. He got social media followers, thousands of them, and suddenly every moment of his life was content to be monetized. He had people who laughed at his jokes, who cheered him on, who encouraged him to be more cruel. That audience made him meaner, not kinder. It made him bolder with his mockery. I became the perfect target, quiet, steady, working a normal job, living a normal life. There was nothing flashy about me to defend myself with. I couldn't out-joke him or out-charm him or win a battle of words. So I just stayed quiet and took it. I didn't know yet that one day I'd have power over his life. Last Thanksgiving, Aaron stood up during dinner and raised his glass like he was about to make an important announcement. My entire family got quiet, waiting for his toast. All eyes turned to him. "I want to say something about my sister," he began, looking right at me. My heart jumped a little. Maybe he was finally going to say something nice. Maybe he'd finally seen how hard I worked, how much I tried, how much I cared. Maybe this would be the moment he finally showed me respect. Instead, he smiled that cruel smile I knew too well. "To Megan's big job," he said loudly. "Managing, what is it again? Leaky sinks. Fixing toilets." Everyone at the table laughed. My cousins. My aunts. My uncles. Even my parents smiled like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I laughed too, pretending I found it hilarious. I pretended my face didn't feel hot with embarrassment. I pretended I didn't want to leave the table right then and never come back. But it did hurt. It hurt like something sharp lodged inside my chest. The thing was, my job wasn't managing leaky sinks or fixing toilets. I managed entire properties. I handled contracts that were hundreds of pages long, budgets with thousands of dollars, tenant relations, maintenance scheduling, legal compliance, insurance issues. I made sure buildings didn't fall apart. I made sure people had safe places to live. It was important work. It mattered. But that didn't matter to Aaron. He only saw what he wanted to see, someone smaller than him to make fun of. Aaron wouldn't stop talking about his townhouse. It was a 2-bedroom in the Hawthorne neighborhood, the trendy part of Portland, and he treated it like he'd purchased it himself with his own money. He hadn't. He rented it. But you'd never know from the way he bragged about it constantly. He talked about the perfect kitchen with stainless steel appliances that he never actually used. He talked about the private balcony where he hosted parties and pretended to have this glamorous lifestyle. He talked about his professional neighbors like they were some kind of status symbol that proved his worth. Every single time I saw him, there was a new story about how amazing his place was. How much better it was than everyone else's. How much better his life was than mine. One day he texted me, "Coming over. Get snacks. Don't be cheap." 3 months before that text arrived, something important had happened at work. My regional manager called me into her office. She offered me a promotion, the kind I'd been working toward for years. I became the portfolio manager for my company. That meant I didn't just manage individual properties anymore. I managed dozens of them. I oversaw the people who managed them. I had access to every lease, every complaint, every violation, every problem in our entire system, including Aaron's townhouse. He didn't know about the promotion. I hadn't told him. He didn't know his own sister now had his whole rental history in her hands. He also didn't know how many complaints existed under his name. He had absolutely no idea what was coming toward him. 3 months before Aaron showed up to mock my apartment, things had started going wrong at his place. The first issue was rent payment. He was late on it. 2 weeks late, then a full month late. When he finally paid, he made up some excuse about his bank account being weird or the system glitching. Then it happened again the next month. He was late again. The pattern was becoming clear. Late payments were now in his file. There were 2 noise complaints from neighbors. Excessive music at night when people were trying to sleep before work the next day. He ignored the first warning letter that came in the mail. He ignored the second one too. Then there was the mandatory maintenance inspection that all tenants had to allow once a year. The landlord needed to check the pipes, the electricity, the overall condition of the unit to make sure everything was safe. It was in his lease agreement in black and white. Aaron never scheduled it. He just ignored the notices they sent him. I had all of this documented in front of me on my computer. Red flags stacked on top of red flags stacked on top of more red flags. In my job, I protect tenants who are really trying their best. People going through hard times. People who make honest mistakes but own up to them. People who communicate and work with us to solve problems. But Aaron wasn't like that at all. He was reckless and careless and arrogant about it. He thought the rules didn't apply to him. He thought he could just do whatever he wanted and slide by without consequences. For 3 months, I didn't tell Aaron I'd been promoted. I didn't tell him that I could see all his problems in the system. I didn't tell him that I now had his entire file in my hands. I had my reasons for staying quiet. If Aaron had known I was now in a position of power over him, he would have weaponized that information immediately. He would have bragged about having a connection inside the company. He would have used me to dodge responsibility and avoid consequences. My sister works there, he'd say, expecting special treatment and favors. He'd probably use it as another thing to mock me with, like I was just his personal connection, not an actual professional doing her job well. So I said nothing. I just watched his file grow thicker and thicker with violations. Late payments. Ignored warnings. Missed inspections. Neighbor complaints. The pile kept growing. I documented everything carefully, but I didn't enforce anything. I gave him a chance. I gave him grace and extra time. I thought maybe one day he'd get it together and turn things around. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet, he'd figure it out on his own without my help. I was protecting him, I told myself during those 3 months. I was being the good sister. But I wasn't being fair to the other tenants who followed the rules. I wasn't being fair to the system and the rules that existed for a reason. I wasn't being fair to myself either, and I was starting to realize that. The text came on a Thursday afternoon. Coming over. Get snacks. Don't be cheap. I was absolutely exhausted from a 12-hour shift at work. I'd spent the entire day dealing with 3 different property emergencies. A broken water main that flooded 2 units, a tenant dispute between neighbors, and a heating system that had gone out in the middle of winter. My feet hurt so badly I could barely walk. My back hurt from bending over looking at pipes. My brain was foggy and tired. The last thing I wanted was company. But this was Aaron. He was my older brother. Part of me still wanted to impress him, even after all the years of mockery. Part of me still thought that if I just tried hard enough, if I cleaned enough, if I had good snacks, if I showed him I was doing okay, maybe he'd finally be nice to me. Maybe he'd finally see me as more than just the barely getting by sister. Maybe this would be the time. So even though I was exhausted beyond belief, I tidied my entire studio. I swept the floors until they shined. I wiped down the counters and organized my things. I made my tiny apartment as perfect as it could possibly be. I even went to the store and bought the expensive snacks he liked even though I was watching my budget. Chips that cost $4 a bag. Fancy cheese from the good deli counter. Good beer. I spent money I didn't really have because I wanted him to see that I was doing well. I wanted him to be proud of me. I wanted his approval so badly. I regret that now. I regret spending money to try to buy his respect. I regret cleaning my home like I was ashamed of it. I regret caring that much about his approval and validation. When Aaron walked in through my door, he wrinkled his nose like he'd smelled something bad. Something terrible and offensive. "This is it," he said, looking around my studio apartment like it was the smallest, saddest place he'd ever seen in his entire life. He didn't even say hello. He didn't ask how my day was or if I was okay after my 12-hour shift. He just looked at my home like it disappointed him deeply. Then he pulled out his phone. He hit record. I watched the red light blink to life, and my heart sank. "This is where dreams come to die, guys," he announced to the camera, spreading his arms wide. He started panning around my apartment like he was filming a documentary about poverty and failure. He showed my little kitchen where I'd put out the snacks he'd asked for. He showed my bedroom visible through the open door. He showed my used furniture that I'd carefully decorated with plants and photos of places I wanted to visit. Every single thing I owned became a joke in his commentary. Every object on his screen felt like a personal attack. Something cold snapped inside me. It was like a light switch flipping off. I felt all the years of his teasing rush up my throat at once. All the times I'd laughed along when it wasn't funny. All the times I'd tried harder to impress him. All the times I'd bought his love with good snacks and a clean apartment. In that moment, I realized something important. I didn't have to take this anymore. And I had something he didn't know about. I had power. Back to the moment. Aaron's phone was still on speaker with the landlord. The landlord was still on the line. "Megan, I need your recommendation on his rent increase," the landlord was saying in that professional voice. Aaron's eyes shot open so wide I thought they might fall out of his head. "Megan," he repeated slowly, his voice getting quieter. "Recommendation. Increase." Everything was connecting for him all at once in real time. His late payments. His ignored warnings. His missed inspections. His noise complaints. His sister who he'd just been mocking on camera. His sister who he'd spent years dismissing. His sister who now had control over his future. The pieces were clicking into place like a combination lock finally opening up. His face went from red to white to grey in the span of seconds. The phone was still recording, still live-streaming to whatever audience he'd been talking to. I could imagine the comments rolling in fast. People realizing what was happening. The dramatic twist of his own sister being the one who now held his fate in her hands. It was almost too perfect. Almost like something written for a movie script. But it was real. This was actually happening. And I was in control of it. The power felt different than I expected. I stepped past Aaron slowly, my voice steady and calm despite my racing heart. "I'll call you back shortly," I told the landlord. I hung up the phone before Aaron could say anything else or try to interrupt. He hissed at me immediately, desperation creeping into his voice. "What the hell does that mean?" His voice was sharp and desperate at the same time. I turned to look at him, really look at him, for the first time that evening. "It means," I said slowly and carefully, "the era of me covering for you is over." Those words hung in the air between us. They were heavy and solid and true like nothing I'd said to him before. Aaron's phone was still recording. His audience was probably going absolutely crazy trying to understand what was happening in real time. But Aaron wasn't thinking about his audience anymore. He was thinking about his rent. He was thinking about the fact that his sister, the one he'd just been mocking on camera for thousands of people, was about to have a serious conversation with his landlord about raising his payment. He was thinking about what that meant for his comfortable life. He was thinking about consequences for maybe the first time ever in his life. He followed me around my apartment like a shadow. He couldn't seem to stay still. "Meg, come on," he said, his voice changing from harsh to pleading. He sounded desperate now. "You wouldn't raise my rent, right? We're family. You wouldn't do that to family. Come on, Meg. Please tell me you wouldn't do that." The desperation in his voice was shocking to hear. It didn't match the confident person who'd been filming my home just minutes ago. It didn't match the person who'd spent years mocking me and making me feel small. This was a different Aaron. Smaller, scared, unsure of himself. Part of me felt bad for him. Part of me wanted to reach out and reassure him like I always did. Part of me wanted to take the easy way out and let him slide by. But I didn't say anything. I just moved around my small apartment, putting away the snacks he hadn't even touched. The expensive cheese. The fancy beer. Everything I'd bought to try to impress him. He kept trying, kept pushing, kept begging. "Megan, please. I can explain about the rent payments. I can explain about the noise complaints. It's not what you think. But I wasn't interested in explanations. Not anymore. Not after all these years. He'd made his choices. He'd ignored the warnings. He'd thought the rules didn't apply to him. And now he was going to find out that they did. The next morning at work, I opened Aaron's tenant folder on my computer screen. My hands were shaking a little bit, not from nervousness, but from the weight of what I was about to do. Every ignored notice was there. Every complaint. Every violation. It was like a paper trail of carelessness and arrogance stretching back months. I'd been documenting it all for 3 months, but I'd never actually done anything with it. I'd always given him grace. I'd always told myself I was protecting him by staying quiet and not enforcing the rules. But now I realized something different and important. By staying quiet, I was also protecting him from consequences. I was teaching him that his actions didn't matter. I was telling him that because he was my brother, the rules didn't apply. That wasn't protection. That was enabling him. That was being unfair to everyone else. I pulled up the rent evaluation form on my screen. It was a standard document we used for all tenants without exception. Did they pay on time? No. Had they ignored warnings? Yes. Had they been cooperative with maintenance requests? No. Had there been complaints from neighbors about them? Yes. I filled out the form honestly and carefully. I didn't exaggerate anything. I didn't put in things that weren't true or verified. I just told the truth. And the truth was that Aaron was a problem tenant. He needed a rent increase and conditional renewal. I attached my recommendation to his file officially. The next day, a new complaint came in from Aaron's neighbor about his unit. Excessive late-night music at 3 in the morning. A rooftop party the previous weekend that had gone until dawn. People yelling, dancing. Music so loud that the neighbors couldn't sleep or work. But here was the critical thing. Aaron had told me he couldn't afford to raise his rent because he wasn't throwing parties. He said his life was quiet and responsible. He'd lied to my face. He'd hosted a rooftop party and then lied about it when I confronted him. I attached the complaint to his file with the exact timestamp when it was submitted. The evidence was piling up quickly. This wasn't about me wanting revenge anymore. It was about being fair to the other tenants, to the rules, to the system I worked for. Aaron had broken agreements that were written down. He'd ignored warnings that were official. He'd lied when confronted. These were facts. Not opinions. Not emotions. Just facts that existed in the file, documented and dated and verified. The maintenance department did their routine inspection of his unit. They found things that needed to be reported officially. Cracked tiles in the bathroom. A broken railing on the balcony he bragged about constantly to everyone who would listen. Mildew growing in the closet. These weren't small issues that could be ignored or overlooked. These were lease violations. Things that needed to be fixed according to the lease agreement. According to his lease, tenants had to report maintenance problems within 24 hours. Aaron hadn't reported any of them. He'd just let them sit there and get worse. The maintenance report came with recommendations for repairs and re-inspection. The unit needed a re-inspection after all repairs were completed. Aaron never scheduled it. He just ignored that notice too, like he ignored all the others. I added the official maintenance report to his file. The stack of documents was getting thicker and thicker. The HOA, the homeowners association that handled common areas, flagged Aaron's unit for recycling contamination. He was putting the wrong things in the recycling bin. Repeatedly. Multiple times. Documented. Fined. He never paid the fine. It just kept piling up on his account. This sounds small and insignificant, but it showed a pattern. A clear pattern of ignoring rules. A pattern of ignoring consequences. A pattern of thinking the normal standards didn't apply to him. The fine appeared on his renewal conditions now. Part of what he'd have to pay if he wanted to keep his lease. I updated his file one more time with all the information. My official assessment was done and complete. The landlord asked me for it personally, and I wrote it down carefully and thoughtfully. I made sure every single word was true. Aaron Walsh is a high-impact tenant, I wrote. His file contains multiple unaddressed maintenance issues, repeated late payments, ignored warnings, and neighbor complaints. He has demonstrated non-compliance with lease terms and poor communication with management. I strongly recommend a rent increase and conditional renewal pending completion of all repairs and compliance with all lease terms. I read it over 3 times carefully. It wasn't revenge. It was responsibility. It was honesty. It was what I was supposed to do as a professional. It was what I should have done 3 months ago instead of protecting him because he was family. I sent it to his landlord officially. Aaron called me screaming. His voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear to protect my hearing. $680 a month increase. Are you insane? You can't do this. You can't do this to me. You're my sister. You can't do this. I let him vent for 2 full minutes. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue back. I didn't defend myself. I just listened to his panic and anger and desperation. When he finally stopped to take a breath, I said quietly, "Aaron, this is the result of your choices. The late payments. The ignored warnings. The noise complaints. The maintenance problems. These are all documented. These are all real. I didn't create them. You did. I'm just being honest about them." He hung up without saying goodbye. He tried to negotiate with the landlord directly. He tried to charm his way out of it using the same techniques that had always worked before. He promised he'd be better. He promised he'd pay on time from now on. He promised he'd fix all the maintenance problems. He promised he'd stop throwing parties. The landlord listened politely, but they pointed to the file. To the 3 months of violations. To my professional recommendation. They said the rent increase would stand. They said they'd reevaluate his situation in 6 months if things improved significantly. Aaron tried to charm the office staff. The same technique that probably worked on everyone else his whole life. But they'd seen his file too. They pointed back to the documentation. For the first time in his life, his charm failed him completely. The rules applied to him just like they applied to everyone else. No exceptions. No special treatment. He showed up at my office one day without calling first. He didn't yell this time. He didn't try to charm me. He just looked small. He looked defeated by life. He sat in the chair across from my desk and his shoulders were hunched down. His eyes were red like he hadn't slept in days. He whispered, "Meg, I can't afford that. I can't afford a $680 increase. Help me, please. You're my sister. Help me." My chest ached deeply. I remembered all the years of his teasing. I remembered the Thanksgiving toast. I remembered him filming my apartment and mocking it. I remembered him wrinkle his nose at my home like it was trash. I remembered trying so hard to impress him, to buy his respect with expensive snacks and a clean apartment. And I remembered the moment something snapped inside me. I said gently, "I can't bend policy for family. Aaron, the rules exist for a reason. They apply to everyone equally. That's what being professional means. That's what being fair means. I'm sorry you're struggling. But this is the consequence of your choices. You have 6 months to improve your file. After that, we can reevaluate." He gave notice to vacate his apartment. The townhouse he'd bragged about for years, the one with the luxury kitchen and the private balcony and the professional neighbors, was gone. He found a cramped, older 1-bedroom apartment across town. No balcony. No stainless steel appliances. No stories to tell. No audience to impress. He moved quietly without any fanfare. I only found out because my coworker mentioned seeing him loading boxes into a truck early one morning. He didn't tell me he was leaving. He didn't say goodbye. He just disappeared from his old place. I felt bad about it. I felt guilty about my role. I wondered if I'd been too harsh. But then I remembered that I had given him months to improve his behavior. I had documented everything fairly and honestly. I had done my job correctly. His consequence was real, but it was earned. A month later, my regional manager called me into her office. I thought I was in trouble. I thought maybe Aaron had complained, or maybe there was some problem with how I'd handled his situation. But that wasn't it at all. She told me my evaluations had been singled out for excellence across the entire company. Specifically, the difficult cases where I'd been honest and fair, even when it was complicated and personal. My integrity. My professionalism. My refusal to let personal relationships cloud my judgment. She offered me a promotion. Senior property manager. A significant raise that made my eyes widen. More responsibility. More authority. More respect from my peers. I'd done the right thing. The universe had noticed and rewarded it. I signed a lease on a bright, spacious one-bedroom apartment with real hardwood floors throughout. Real sunlight came through the windows all day. There was actual space to move around without bumping into things. I could cook without hitting my own furniture. I hung my own photos on the walls. I bought new furniture, not used, but chosen by me for beauty and comfort. For the first time, my home didn't feel like survival mode. It felt like pride. It felt like success. It felt like something I'd earned and deserved. When I put my key in the lock of my new place, when I stepped through that door, I knew something had shifted inside me permanently. I was no longer the quiet sister. I was no longer the barely getting by sister. I was Megan Walsh, senior property manager. And this was my home. I don't rub my success in Aaron's face anymore. I don't need to. Life already taught him the lesson he needed. He stopped bragging about his apartment. He stopped mocking my job. He stopped making jokes about my life. Slowly, over time, he started treating me with respect. Not the fake respect of someone trying to use me. Real respect. The kind that comes from finally seeing someone clearly. When I see him now at family gatherings, something is completely different between us. The dynamic shifted that night when the landlord called. The power wasn't about me being cruel or getting revenge. It was about me finally choosing to be fair, first to others, then to myself. People who underestimate you often hand you the very tools that build your victory. His mockery taught me to stay quiet and observe everything. His disrespect taught me to value my own worth. His arrogance taught me that everyone should follow the same rules equally. That knowledge became my power. Not revenge. Real power. And the best part. I'm finally at peace.